28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, 12 seconds. That is when the world will end.
If The Matrix gave me the initial idea that film and philosophy could work together, even though it's a lot more overt possibly in the sequels and we later learned it was a trans allegory, it's still there. I mean, you can still enjoy it as a sci-fi action film if you really want to, without taking any of that away, granted, but it is there. The seeds were sown in my younger mind. And a few years later, those seeds were bearing fruit, because Donnie Darko, I think, is a lot more philosophical, definitely wears it on its sleeve. Whilst it can still be enjoyed on its own merits as a story, I think the philosophy is the driving force behind why it's been so popular over the years. Not in its initial run, and there's a weird coincidence, I guess, unless I am being guided by some kind of death rabbit that I don't know about. But the initial theatrical run was around 2 years ago. It was a few days before when this goes live that the 20th anniversary actually hit. I did not plan this. I keep doing this, it's kind of scary. I did not plan that at all. But what better time, then, to talk about Donnie Darko from 2001. It was written and directed by Richard Kelly and stars Jake and Maggie Gyllenhaal. I'm not going to do the Conan bit. I was tempted, but I'm not going to.
Oh my god. It is actually Gyllenhaal.
It also stars Holmes Osborne, Mary McDonnell, Davy Chase, Noah Weil, or Wiley, one of those is correct and someone's going to correct me, I'm sure, Andrew Barrymore, as well as Patrick Swayze, Beth Grant. There's so many great people in this, and part of that is actually through Drew Barrymore. The script was floating around and no one was biting. No one saw the potential in this, but it came across Drew Barrymore's lap and she went, I will bankroll this. I have a company, Flower Films, which is why that name appears at the start of the film, in case you didn't know who that was, what company that was. And yeah, we'll bankroll this, whatever you want. And I'm sure that's how she wangled a role for herself. But still, yeah, these are great cast members. And a lot of the extras are great too, a lot of the lesser known people. This was Seth Rogen's first film. He was in a TV series prior to this, but it was his first film appearance, and you can tell he hadn't quite found his footing yet, in all fairness to him. But yeah, there's so many people here who do so well. Jenna Malone, who I had a massive crush on for far longer than I'd like to admit. But yeah, this cast all coming together in this film worked so well. It's why the film works as well as the philosophy. But some of you may not have seen it for a while, so let's have a brief refresher, and I'll talk a bit about the film before I talk about the philosophical elements. I know this is meant to be all about that, but I think we need to get up to speed. And like I say, just talk about some of the fun bits first. So this broadly tells the tale of a troubled teen who, as far as I understand it, has been held back a year or two because of troubles with setting fire to things in the past and what have you, and his issues as well, other than that, his psychiatric problems. But he wakes up, well, no. He sleepwalks out to a golf course and is told that the world will end in a certain number of days. The numbers of which now make me think of Lost, because any sequence of numbers brings Lost to mind, although that came after. So JJ might have been inspired, who knows. But then he meets a bunch of people over his journey and interacts with them, and they are unknowingly guiding him towards the end result. Unfortunately, for the world to be saved, he has to die. And it's a very bleak thing if you think about it. A film where we follow a teenager who's got a load of issues but could be a good guy. I mean, we see so many times in the film he's inherently kind and warm and wants to make the world better, like a lot of people with issues do, but there's so many things just conspiring against him. But he has to die for the world to be saved. The ultimate sacrifice. And I think the fact that he accepts this so well again just says so much about his character, but that's getting more to the philosophical, so we'll put that to one side. But there are some great moments in this. There's a lot of humour, considering, like I say, how dark that idea is. The whole dinner table scene at the start, which sets up the family dynamics, etc., is brilliant. I still want to know what a fuck-ass is. It's in the film. I don't care, I'm going to say it. I still want to know what one is, and how exactly one would suck a fuck. There's a great moment, of course, later on with Beth Grant's character of Kitty Farmer, where, I mean, I could say what she says, but I think she's going to say it a lot better than I will, so take it away.
He asked me to forcibly insert the Lifeline exercise card into my anus.
The whole cellar door thing, which actually years later on I learned that was Tolkien. Tolkien had said that. And I'd agree with it. I mean, if you listen to particularly Quenya and Sindari in the Elvish languages, you can hear that in it. It's got that very mellifluous kind of way, which means, if you don't know, it means like kind of flowing nicely. But there's so many other moments in this that I don't think I picked up years ago. I've watched both the theatrical and the director's cut. I prefer the theatrical, and I'll talk about that in a second. But one of the things I wanted to talk about that I picked up this time that I didn't really fully acknowledge, I got it, but not in the same way. The Autumn Angel dance by Charita, which is then obviously followed by the whole notorious sparkle motion bit. Charita's dance is beautiful. It's simple. She's not a great dancer, but it's from the heart. It's passion. It is very engaging, and it's the only moment where she seems just lost in everything. She's just able to just do this and express herself in this beautiful way. But then we have sparkle motion, and everyone's like on their feet dancing and yeah, clap, and spectacle is so much better than a heartfelt performance. And I think sort of mid-late 80s, perhaps even earlier, the world was sadly starting to get like this. The flashy thing is the good thing. The passion project, oh, it's fine, but it's not this pizzazz. The thing that's pushed is flashy and look at this, it's brand new and sparkling, you want to look at this. But the thing that really speaks to people is the passion project. And that's an allegory, I think, for this film, in the film. Ironically, even though that was probably written before he had trouble getting it funded and before it technically flopped. Because this is, I think, the first, if not only film that's technically a flop that got a director's cut. And that really helped it reach a wider audience. I'm glad that that happened. But yeah, this was a flop. People just did not get it on first run, the limited theatrical release. They just couldn't wrap their heads around it. Which is why I think the director's cut has a lot of the pages of the philosophy of time travel, the book. It's to make sure people know, but I don't like that. I didn't like the hand-holding. I think the film is fine as is. Yes, I did additional research afterwards, but I still got a basic idea of what it was all about and how it all sort of wrapped around. And there's a theory floating out there, and I don't know how much I believe it in some ways, but I do see potential that Donnie's situation with being the living receiver is on a loop. I think it's mentioned in the additional materials that that's a possibility. If the living receiver doesn't fulfill the goal, it'll loop round until they're ready to do it. It's basically they're fated to die in a lot of ways. But we do see, I think, one particular element of this loop that, again, I'd not thought about before until my most recent view. Grandma Death, Roberta Sparrow, constantly goes back and forth to the mailbox, waiting for someone to write about her book, clearly. And she's on a loop. She just repeats the same actions. And the time when it's disturbed is when Donnie's nearby. Already, the effects of the tangent universe and the living receiver and everything around that are affecting the loop. So she's going, wait, something is happening now, something has changed. She can feel that and knows that it's likely that this will be the one that works. Now, whether she'll continue to do that once Donnie's loop is closed and we're back in the prime reality with him sadly being crushed by a jet engine, who knows? But I did find that an interesting link back. But yeah, there's so much here, and I love the fact that, again, using the vernaculars of the film and the ideas behind it, him burning down Jim Cunningham's house was absolutely vital. Not only, I used to take this as a test. It was Frank going, will you do this for me? And he's like, yeah, okay. You've done it, brilliant, we can move on to the stage, whatever of the plan. I don't know how many it is on that point. But I realised this time, if that doesn't happen, Jim Cunningham doesn't get arrested. Beth, Grant's character of Kitty Farmer, doesn't want to go to the arraignment. Sam and Rose aren't on the plane. I mean, Sam would be because she was part of Sparkle Motion, but Rose wouldn't be on the plane, meaning she's not out of the way, so the party doesn't happen that leads to Gretchen and Donnie meeting Frank. There's so much here that when you start to see how everything is put together, this is well made. It's not Chekhov's gun, it's Chekhov's whole manufacturing plant. It's everything is in service of getting Donnie to the point he needs to be. And I love that. Once I've made that connection, I was like, this is brilliant. And yeah, we end up with that scenario. Also, by the way, quickly about the whole meeting of Frank. I had a sudden flash of realization the night before I'm recording this. I suddenly went, whoa. I literally went, whoa. I'm not joking. The only time that we see Gretchen, Donnie, and Frank in the same place is when Frank has clearly his eye injury visible because the head's removed, the mask. Gretchen is unconscious in some format, and Donnie's wearing a hoodie, which isn't perhaps that unusual, but still, all of these factors come together. The only two times that all of these three characters are there at the same place, these factors are at play. And that, like I say, that hit me. I got chills when I suddenly realised this. So well planned. And the last thing I want to talk about the film before I talk about the philosophy more so, is one of the things I don't like about the director's cut. Like I say, I think the first original theatrical version stands on its own regardless. But in the theatrical cut, one of the great lines of why you're wearing that stupid bunny suit, why you're wearing that stupid man suit, the response line of Frank's is whispered and hushed. He acknowledges he's in the theatre, but also it makes you listen harder. They're going, listen to this. This is deep. And I'm 14. But yeah, this is deep. This is something you need to pay attention to. Think about this. And I also love the, why are you called Frank? It was my father's name and his father before me. A lot of people misquote this. It's like the kick-ass and chew bubblegum. A lot of people say, oh, it's the name of his father and his father before him, because that's how we think of it. But he says, the name of my father, a little smirk, and his father before me. This again is evidence of the loop to me. If his father and his father before him, that doesn't work unless there is some weird circuitous thing going on. Frank is aware of this version of Frank, because he is a tool that is guiding Donnie. He's the most overt guiding force. So he's fully aware of everything and he's making sure it happens. And I love that. There's so much in just this one moment. And of course, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Steve Baker and Carmen Day is, chilling. This whole scene, everything that happens in this scene was, even back when, when I first watched it, I sat up and paid attention. And every single time, even if I'm kind of like, just make a quick note, I pause it. And then I'm watching the scene, and then I'll pause to make the notes afterwards. I absolutely love that one scene. And of course, the fact it's got the Evil Dead stuff happening as well is great. But yeah, there's so much in this film, before we even talk about the deep philosophical things that I wanted to talk about, that are deep and philosophical. And like I say, it's got the humour, it's got some great moments. So watch it again. If it's been, even if it's only been like 5-10 years since you last watched it, watch it again. It's great. And I really enjoyed watching it this time. I struggled to make notes because I was enjoying it too much. I had to keep pausing. It's just under 2 hours, the theatrical cut, and it took me probably 2.5. But the philosophical things I really wanted to talk about is how this film brought me to my own philosophical mindset, my own interpretation. And I think Donnie also has that too. At the start of the film, with everything going on and how difficult his life is, and as we learn from Dr. Thurman later on, his possible paranoid schizophrenia really acting out of control, he doesn't really have much in prospects. He's, like I said at the start, held back a year. There's not much going for him. He's probably quite nihilistic. There is no point. There is no point to living. There's no point finding a meaning at all. It's all just things happen and that's it. You die. We just go on this route towards death. But I think throughout the film, once he realizes his role and everything like that in this, he changes. And he goes through a few different models of philosophy. There's a moment where he's talking to Dr. Monotov about the idea of free will and things like that. And whilst free will does play a part in what I think the eventual philosophical idea of this film is, it's also a part in fatalism, which I know a lot of people think fatal means dead, but fatal literally just means like fated. It's the same stem. So fatalism is the idea that there is no free will. We have a bunch of stuff that will happen to us, and there is absolutely nothing we can do about that. It's kind of, I guess, the opposite of nihilism in some ways, but also it can be interpreted still quite bleakly, because in nihilism you have the choice, but there is no point to the choice. In fatalism there is no choice, so there's no point trying to do anything because you're going to do something anyway. Whatever happens will happen, and you have no control over that. It's also very positive, and it gives people, I guess, a get out if, oh, it's fate, I was meant to do that. Yeah, but murdering 50 people is not cool, but it was fate. People, I'm sure have used that excuse. So you can interpret that two ways, which I think is, again, just showing that Donnie's mindset is getting more positive. Throughout this film, we see how much of a good person he is. And I think given a purpose, given something that he can wrap his mind around, like what is happening to me and why, gives him something to do, and it makes him feel more valued. But I consider Donnie Darko, and I mean that both in the character and the film, as absurdist, not existentialist. I did look at that first. I was sitting on the fence. Existentialism is more the idea that there is absolutely no purpose than what you make yourself. Your purpose for being here isn't preordained. There is no set path. It's all just whatever you make of it. The meaning of life is whatever it is to you. And I don't think that works with Donnie Darko as a film and character. Absurdism, especially that based on the ideas of Camus in particular, is more about the idea that there's possibly a set path, but your search for meaning is kind of pointless because there kind of isn't one, and you're at this weird juxtaposition. I think the fact they talk about fatalistic ideas as a jumping off point to get to that, I think says that this is where it ends. Donnie knows that there is some kind of force guiding him. There isn't true free will. The fact he sees these weird worms, these wormholes that are guiding people to what they're meant to do, it precludes the idea of free will entirely, because people are going along the channels that's been set. But when he asks later about what would happen if you were in God's channel and could do things about it, that's when he's starting to kind of get the idea of like, so there is a kind of free will, but what about outside of that? And he's trying to find meaning. He says there's a whole situation with the therapist, Dr. Thurman, where they're talking about, whether he's alone and the search for God is absurd. I mean, she paraphrases him and makes that conclusion, but he doesn't contradict her. And maybe I'm leaning into the word absurd of that. That's where I've come off this. I don't know. But I do think that's an important part as well. The search for God, the search for meaning, is absurd. The core of Camus' type of absurdism is there is no point searching for meaning. It's absurd to live your life in spite of whatever you think is fated. It rejects the idea of free will. It denies that idea. But it still says live your life in spite of it. Don't be constrained by what you're told you have to be. Don't be constrained by what you believe is your destined path. Destiny will happen to you, so enjoy the journey. Don't strive for meaning like an existentialist. Don't think, well, there's no point to anything. Live in that middle ground of going, what will happen? Will happen. If it's fated, it's fated, but I'm going to be who I want to be inside of that idea. And this is why I love absurdism, and this is why I say I think Donnie Darko as a character in a film is an absurdist, or absurdist piece, I guess, in the case of the film. It's about the fact that, yes, there is something that will happen to you regardless, but be you underneath it all and in spite of it all. It sounds bleak to some people because people don't like the idea of fate and, a lack of free will. But I counter this with the idea of, if there is free will, are you definitely sure that there's free will? How do you know you're not fated to think that you have free will? So yeah, Donnie Darko is an absurdist masterpiece in many ways. It's got flaws. The masterpiece might be a bit overselling it, but it really opened my eyes to philosophy in film, and over the years, like I say, I've shaped my viewpoint, and I consider, thanks to Donnie Darko, that absurdism is a pretty good mindset to have. So I've really enjoyed talking about this. I might have waffled in places. Hopefully I've edited it down so it's a bit more flowing, but I do want to quickly ask you that either later today or within the next couple of days there will be a video on the music channel kind of related to this review analysis thing. So I hope you'll give that a look, and I hope you'll join me next time for something I've already recorded a while back. So I'm giving myself yet another week off. I think I've deserved it. But hope you'll join me for all of that. Until next time, as always, thank you for watching. Take care, and watch out for giant bunny rabbits.